my 6. So yesterday afternoon, we had some interesting activity going on in the forest back here. I was out at the campground, just up the hill, out in the fields there, a little ways, stacking some firewood I'd split the day before. And I just felt the eyes of something upon me, someone or something. So I set the phone up and start recording, try to get it on camera, which I did. You probably saw the video yesterday. A lot of you did. And a lot of folks asked why I didn't. Again, I get this question a lot. Why don't I just bum rush the things? You know, many people mentioned that they clearly saw him, her, it, or they yesterday, several locations in the video. I tried speaking to them, or him, or her, or it, asking them, you know, what they wanted. Of course, no response. Saw some new tree bends, which I was led to believe what they wanted was for me to stay away. One commenter stated something I never thought of. You know, I've been mentioning here the last couple of weeks about hearing these strange sounds, these strange howls at night. And I've actually taken the phone out with me at night when I go out on the front porch, like before I go to bed, just to get that last breath of fresh air, especially night air now that it's warm. You know, it's mid to upper 70s now in Central Virginia during the day, and at night it's been cool the last few nights, but it's going to be in the 50s here the next few nights. So it's just nice to go out, listen to the frogs, get that fresh breath of clean, nice night country air. I've heard these screams, these grunts. So I've taken the phone out with me and just started recording. Wow, you see how quiet it just got? But as you would know, as it would be, we don't hear the stuff when I have the phone on. But somebody commented after seeing the video yesterday that perhaps the strange moans and groans and screams and growls we've been hearing at night have been potentially Bigfoot Sasquatches in labor, giving birth. So to answer that question, why don't I just bum rush them? It's because, like I said at the end of the video yesterday, I know when to leave well enough alone. And I've got a story for you this evening to prove to you why it's important to leave well enough alone. It's an example of what can happen to you if you don't. So, this is not my original story. It comes by way of a guy named Jimmy that I was talking to last week. And we were talking about people being hard-headed, about how sometimes heard a tree knock like a, there it was again. Make sure you're getting my 6. Watch back here, watch for movement, timestamp it. Should be easy to see him because the sun's down over the zenith back there. It's going to be difficult for them, anything to pass through here without just being picked up as if by a spotlight on a stage. Heard like a howl. All right, so you ever notice how like some of the most intelligent people are the most stubborn, the most hard-headed? It's like, you're smart enough to be smart. Last week, I read The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle, or Conan Doyle. You know, the most, I I guess, popular Sherlock Holmes novel. There were 4 novels and like 56 short stories. I'm reading them all. So hearing that dog bark in the middle of nowhere was a bit unnerving. I know it's not the Hound of the Baskervilles. The Hound of the Baskervilles. Did I say Bakervilles? The Hound of the Baskervilles. What might that dog be barking at? That's the question I have. Okay, so if you're that smart to be smart, why can't you be smart enough to just go along to get along? Leave well enough alone at times, okay? So I was talking to this guy, Jimmy, about it, and he told me a story. I don't know the guy well. I'm not going to say that I doubt his story. I'm not going to say I believe it 100% entirely. I'm going to let you decide. But the story was about a childhood friend of his when he was about 12, 13, who was super smart, probably the smartest kid in school, but just couldn't leave well enough alone. And you see the sun back there? I'm not going to point, but you watch just below it. You watch just below that sun. There's something moving around back there behind those. Yep, we got a peaker. There's no breeze right now. There's no wind. Well, except for in that one spot where there's wind. But it's not where we've got movement below the sun. Keep your eyes on that, okay? So anyway, he grew up in Kentucky, part of Appalachistan, right? So we can relate. We've got that Appalachistanian thing going on. He said that, like most Appalachian children, they loved to play in the woods, grew up playing in the woods, fishing, hunting, hiking, everything, exploring. And there was this one very odd place where he grew up in his part of Appalachistan, out in the middle of the mountains, hardwood, deciduous hardwood forest like this all around. But there was one spot where there was like an open, like a meadowish, but in between like a field and a meadow. It's like just as the grass would start to grow, it would die off. Trees wouldn't take root, and it was sizable. It was about the size of a football field. He said you could go, if you went to the bottom of this meadow, we're going to call it a meadow for the purposes of this story. It went upwards at a gradual slope, and at the top, there was like a rock formation, like a pile of rocks, and water came up out of it. Well, he said it was an eerie place, and every time he would go there, he and his friends would go there, they just felt like they were being watched. And he said there, when they were around 12 or 13 years old, they were up in the woods one day. They'd gone hiking. They'd reached that point to where they were almost to the edge of that meadow, and they looked down into it, and it was a good half mile away, but they were about 50 yards away from the tree line. They looked down in there, and they saw what appeared to be a woman in like an old-timey dress. It was like it had like a white top, you know, pads here like this, and then like a long ankle length skirt. She wasn't walking, she wasn't sitting, she was like wrapped up like a pretzel, kind of like, you know, The Ring, the girl from The Ring walking with her. I can't do it. I mean, I need to work on flexibility. I'm a runner. I stretch before I run to, you know, prevent injury. But just all warped and wrapped up like a pretzel, crawling through the meadow. And those guys were like, what in the, you know, world? What in tarnation is that? And it's almost, he said, just as their eyes were registering, seeing this thing, it was gone. Like it vanished. They'd never seen it before. And they assumed maybe, well, they were tired from their hike. Looking back on it, he said later, as an adult who was a little bit more knowledgeable about how things work, they might have been dehydrated. But it was there. That sounded like a whale, like not like a mammal that looks like a fish, but it's really a mammal because it gives birth to its young live, has mammary glands, which means it produces milk to feed its young, and has body hair. A whale is in like a wailing woman, the moan of a woman. Perhaps the woman that was crunched up like a pretzel crawling around through this meadow. Well, about 6 months later, it was winter, they were out there. There were no leaves on the trees. They were deer hunting. They saw something again. It wasn't a woman, it was a man wrapped up like a pretzel, crawling around in that open space. And just as soon as their eyes and their minds registered what it was gone. So the following summer, they happened to be out there, Jimmy and a couple of his buddies, one of which was the hard-headed smart kid. And they saw an old man that they knew from their small community who was out there in the woods as well. He was baiting his deer stand. That's where, you know, for those of you who don't hunt, a lot of times you have a favorite hunting spot. You put a deer stand up in a tree or maybe just hang out in that area. But you might put salt for the deer out there in the summer, maybe apples, get them coming in so that you can, you know, they'll come to you during hunting season. This old man was out there baiting his tree stand, his deer stand, and they just got to talking to him. And they mentioned about how on a couple of occasions they'd seen what appeared to them to be people, human beings, one man, one woman, all curled up and crumpled like a pretzel crawling around down there in that meadow. And the old man told him, I said, well, I'll tell you boys one thing right here and right now, you stay away from that meadow. And they said, why? And he said, well, just stay away from it. Just leave well enough alone. Some weird stuff goes on down there. You got to stay away from it. And they asked him, they said, well, do you ever go down there? And he goes, no. He says, I used to in my youth when I was about y'all's age. But I learned as to why I should not go there, and I never stepped foot back in that meadow again, because there are times when you should just leave well enough alone. So Jimmy and his two buddies, they just keep pressing the old guy. Well, what is it? What's so terrible about this meadow? What happened, you know, in this meadow, or what is happening in this meadow? Why are we witnessing strange things here? Well, he tells them, he says, boys, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. That's not what he said. I just said that because you expected that to come next, right? He goes, listen, boys, he goes, I could tell you, but it might get one of you hurt or worse. If any of you is hard-headed and you're the type that just doesn't know to leave well enough alone. And they think, oh, he's pulling our leg. Some creepy old guy who likes to go sit in the woods and tell scary stories. So he goes, all right. He goes, listen, all I can do is warn you. I can tell you what I know, what I've heard. What you do past that is beyond me, but I would highly advise you to take this to heart. And after I tell you the story, never go down there in that meadow again. And whatever you do, stay away from the rock formation up at the top that is a water source. Don't go anywhere near that. They say, okay, all right, you know, we won't. So he tells them that according to local Appalachian legend, going back more than a century, back before the Civil War, it would have been early 1800s, there was a man and a woman that lived in that meadow, or in that area. The man was an American, early 1800s. His wife, however, was Native American Indian, and she was said to be descended from a direct descendant of, yeah, I see it, of the last known shaman, see right there, shaman of the local Cherokee tribe. And that, as rumor had it, she possessed certain powers. Well, the reason they lived out and kind of in the middle of nowhere, kind of away from everybody, is because they were very independent, very private, and they wanted to be left the hell alone. You hear that tree knock? Things are getting creepy. Why is it that at 6:52 p.m., you see that? After the sun's already dropped down below the horizon, it's coming. Why is it coming back up? All right, so They didn't own the land, I don't guess. I guess they didn't have a deed for it, but back then it's not like it was much of a big deal, big thing. Everybody just kind of respected everybody else's property. Well, I guess there was some local ruffians around there that didn't respect this family's property, and it was because this woman was a Native American Indian. So they would hunt there. They would just pass through there on their four-wheelers anytime they wanted. Of course, that's not true. It's the early 1800s. But you know what I'm saying? Whatever people did back then to piss off their neighbors, they sure did do it. They did a lot of it. Well, one day they were doing it, and the woman happened to be out there, and she kind of went off on them. And they thought it was funny. They didn't take her seriously. Who is this woman of color out here telling us what we're going to do? We're going to do what we're going to do. We don't care about her. And they continue to do what they wanted to do. And, well, she went in the house, and she got a firearm, and she came out shooting at them. Well, they got out of there, but they came back. They came back. Well, they came back either that night or the next night, somewhere there shortly thereafter, and they shot and killed her dog, her and her husband's dog. Then they took the dog, and that water source was their well. It was a deep well that went down maybe 10 or 12 feet. It was a natural well, and the water came up out of it. They threw the dog in the well to poison the water. Now, the family didn't know that that's what they heard the shot, never saw the dog again, didn't realize it had been thrown in the well until after the dog had started to decompose, spoiled the water. And the woman was so upset, they had to leave. They lost their clean water source, at least for a season. She put a curse on the well. She said that anybody that comes here and drinks of this water will die. And anybody who comes after that, who knows of this curse and who knows of this story, and because after she figures, well, one or two person, once that's it, nobody else going to come around, because they're going to know not to. They're going to know better. They're going to know to leave well enough alone. And anybody that doesn't, they're going to drown. They'll be drowned in that well. Well, she told the people this. I mean, people were like, oh, you hear what that crazy, Native American woman out there saying this and that? Well, somebody hard-headed, somebody who was smart, had to go poking the bear, had to go chasing the potential Bigfoot Sasquatch offspring through the forest. Well, they went out there to drink from the well like it was a joke. This, of course, being the next year. And they died. So what they did after that is the locals went in there and they piled rocks into that well. They filled the well up with rocks to close it off to try to prevent people from not leaving well enough alone. Well, no pun intended. Come on, it was too easy. The locals spread the story far and wide. They knew not to go there anymore. They knew to leave well enough alone. Jeez. I really didn't intend for that. Talking about a well, like a haunted, cursed well, and then leave well enough alone. That was not intentional. That was not an intentional pun. That just happened. So anyway, I didn't want to say well again. So every now and then people would want to test it. They'd go up there and it was like a dare. They'd go up there and they'd drink water. Ha, 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 this isn't real. And then they just drop dead. Like before they made it out of the meadow. And it would happen about once a generation. You know how things go. There's that old urban legend. And then once a generation, there's always that super smart kid that doesn't know when to stop. And, but here's a weird thing. Once we got to the point to where technology had advanced and medical technology had advanced to the point to where they could do autopsies, and they did an autopsy on somebody, they determined the cause of death because it was like a 12-year-old kid. 12-year-old kid being Jimmy. Jimmy, the guy that told me this story, Jimmy's childhood friend, went down there after hearing the old man tell them this story. the day, as soon as this old man finished the story, Jimmy's buddy laughed at it. Ran down there, drank from the well, dropped, and was dead before he got out of the meadow. Jimmy and his other buddy and the old man had to haul him out of there. Cause of death when they did the autopsy, drowning. His lungs were full of water. I asked Jimmy if he ever went back to that place after that, and he said, yeah. He went back twice. Once when he was a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate, and he was just thinking about his childhood friend, and he went back. And he said something happened there that caused him not to go back for another 20 years. And I said, well, what was that? And he said, just for an instant, he looked down into that meadow once he had gotten there, and he saw his childhood friend, still 12 or 13 years old, wrapped up like a pretzel, crawling out of the water stream into the meadow. Jimmy shook his head, and he was gone. He said it was so real it terrified him. He didn't go back for 20 years. It was another 20 years before he went back. And it was just a few years back that he went back. Jimmy's about 10 years younger than me. And I said, well, what happened when you went back? He said, I saw him again. Sometimes it's best to leave things alone. See you for more next time.